Hi everybody, I'm Lady Sylvine and welcome to another get-together with some lovely people. I have Cole from the Kingdom and DarthShadie Lavellan with me today to discuss Dragon Age the Veilguard. This is part 1 of the entire series, of 3 parts in total, as you can guess, and the first part will be about the story and narrative, and then we go on. If you want to introduce yourselves, of course.
Hi, I'm Cole from the Kingdom.
And I'm DarthShadie Lavellan.
Just a quick note about, I guess, the theme, which is important to the narrative, because you feel it in every single conversation, I feel, which is regret. But also a mix of, like, hope, empathy, identity. There's just a lot of that throughout the entire story, I feel. Thoughts?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. I didn't actually think about it until you said it, but yeah, totally. Regret and identity are absolutely big. They're moods in the game that just kind of like permeate a lot of the main story.
Yeah, and the way Rook reacts in regard to Solas's regrets determines how Solas responds to Rook, and then determines how other characters respond and Rook's choices depending on Rook's feelings on Solas's regrets, because the Solas's regrets play an important part for moving towards the end game, to understanding what drove Solas. So that's his backstory. But then Rook faces a few things and other characters face certain regrets, and definitely the identity, whether it's within the self or within the culture or in terms of relationships and rapport, there's that as well.
Yeah, I really like that. I wasn't expecting for the theme to be so present when the devs were talking about in Q&As and stuff. I wasn't expecting it just to be every single scene felt like this will have consequences, this character will remember that, and you really felt that throughout the entire story, I think. Even just the little triangles branching off for the dialogue options, the amount of stress that caused me thinking, well, what is this actually going to mean? You know?
Yes, and I noticed, so with Rook tried everything with the first warden, and being humorous, being diplomatic, and then at the end he was just like, okay, I've had enough, and he punches him. I had no idea that later down the line, in another story, not a main quest story even, it would have consequences in our interaction when this character pops up again. It was like, it's one action, it's one choice, talking him down or punching him, and then it like way later down the line, it has impact again. It's like, whoa, okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that for a second because there's been a lot of people saying good things and people saying bad things about the game, and I think it's important to acknowledge both, because I do love this game, but there are some shortcomings, and that choice, while it has a good consequence, does that consequence really matter to anything except like a few seconds, a minute or two?
Does it matter to you though?
No, not really. I didn't care about the first warden. I wanted to throw him off the cliff.
Oh no!
It was impactful to realize, oh, okay, this choice has consequences later, but you're right, Cole. This choice does not impact the main story.
Yeah, fair.
There are other choices that do impact the main story, and there are choices that impact the individual companions, which we can get into more later. But definitely some choices have more impact than others, for sure.
do we want to talk about the kind of first big choice you get, which is saving Minrathous or Treviso?
Oh god. Yeah, sure.
All right,
Yeah.
I did live reactions, or not live reactions, but throughout various points in the game, I recorded vlogs to share my honest thoughts on what was going on, and this is one that kept coming back. I think, well, I love that this choice has consequences, and it opens up new quests depending on what you chose, and it drastically affects how certain characters will react. This is a good, impactful choice. However, I do feel like it was kind of weak in how it was presented, because I don't know why it's such a big deal where Rook goes. Like, why does Rook make all the difference when, you know, he's really just another soldier. He's not a super soldier. He doesn't. It didn't feel very justified.
Do you think maybe... I'm trying to remember what was revealed in the story at that point, but maybe that could be justified in that Rook has the dagger, Rook has the connection to Solus and the gods.
Yeah, that's
Maybe.
what I was going to say, the dagger and the connection to Solus. I'd have to rewatch my recording of that scene, but I think the gods attacking and Rook, wherever Rook goes, that might have given Rook an edge in the fight.
And fair
I'm
enough,
guessing.
but I do think the presentation was still weak because maybe that wasn't communicated clearly enough.
Definitely, there are definitely other areas where there are scenes that are weak, whether they're simple or complex scenes. Definitely there are weaker scenes, and that plays a difference. There are definitely certain concepts that are glossed over, and some that are more taken in depth, and that too makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Did either of you feel like the pacing was kind of weird in this game?
It was up and down.
Yeah.
There were definitely things that came out of the blue, definitely things that were fast-paced, and other areas that were slower-paced. I don't have a problem with pacing, but there definitely was areas that built more slowly, and the ending is like climax, like endless climaxes, and you're like, whoa. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, especially since, like, Act 2 is really, really long. Act 2 is 90% of the game, I feel like.
Oh,
Especially-
I thought Act 1 was...
I thought it was Act 1 because I did most of everything in
Me too.
Act 1. Like, I did everything that I could in Act 1. So in Act 2, all I had left, like I had the dagger, I had Mythal's essence and everything. So all I had left was the companion quests and a few faction quests. But like most of the exploration, most of everything was in Act 1. Then Act 2 was faster paced for me. And then Act 3 what starts at the point of no return, or the conversation with the Inquisitor, and then it's just like so fast paced you barely have time to take things in. A little too intense, maybe, in comparison.
For me, maybe it's just the way I played, but the way I ended up doing I probably did it wrong, but but I thought they're not going to show a big choice or story thing at me before I've got all the companions. So I didn't explore. Okay, so my choice with Treviso and Minrathous was I picked to save Minrathous. But I didn't explore any of Treviso because I was too busy collecting the companions, so I just never saw Treviso at its best. So the rest of the game was... Yeah.
Well, is that why you picked Minrathous? It's because you weren't attached to Treviso?
No, I didn't think I would get that choice would happen so quickly. So after that point, I started just slowing my pace down because I'm like, okay, this story is hitting me with this.
I picked Treviso because Venatos was a crow. So I really like the way that he delivers the line, like, what are they doing to my city? Like, it really, like, it choked me up.
Aw.
And so it was really nice. And I had explored a lot of Minrathous before. And then after, I had to re-explore Minrathous because none of the travel points, well, they were all grayed out again.
Oh.
So the game obliges you to re-explore, and there was one area that I think it's related to a quest only if you save Minrathous, because I couldn't access that one area, and so I could not get that one little candle hop. I'm missing one candle hop.
That's a question, actually. If you choose not to save Minrathous, do you still meet the Inquisitor in Minrathous?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
So I played as a Shadow Dragon, and I really love the Shadow Dragons. I wasn't expecting to, but something about the freedom fighter aspect really appealed to me. I still saved Treviso because I this is another point that's weak for me, is I don't understand how Minrathous got so damaged when they have the best mage army and like such strong walls. I'm like, how did this happen? And I realize now, okay, Venatori probably sabotaged a bunch.
Yeah.
But that leads into another point I want to make, and that is, I think the Venatori are too powerful. I think there's too many of them. In certain games, I'm like, okay, how did this evil faction recruit so many people? But a lot of the time, I can wrap my head around it. I can headcanon some stuff, but I don't get how the Venatori got that powerful after Inquisition.
Yeah, because there were remnants. I think I would have appreciated the Venatori more if they would have done some references to Corypheus, because Corypheus started the faction, and then into Winter Nights they continue the faction in his name, and Corypheus spoke about the gods, spoke about the Tevinter Reborn, and so they could have referenced something about Corypheus's prophecy of his gods, they've returned, whatever, and now we're continuing this, and they recruit more people in his name, and when the gods returned, it's like it can grow more. It felt definitely like there was a lack of, not necessarily references, but a lack of explanation wherein it called for explanation.
I thought they said into Winter Nights, I might be misremembering, but I thought they said Corypheus didn't start the faction, he just kind of adopted them.
Oh, maybe.
But either way, like, they have way too many members. I have the same problem with Cerberus and Mass Effect. But, and we kill a lot of Venatori throughout the course of this game.
Yeah.
And yet somehow they reference they're still, like, invading Orlais. And I'm like, how?
Yeah, it comes across almost like, okay, so the Tevinter Imperium is just Venatori, when it is kind of weird. It feels like everybody and their dog and their godchild is a Venatori at that point.
But we shouldn't spend too long talking about that. What are some other major points we want to hit on?
How do you guys feel like... I'm trying to think of a major event. Like, the main stories in general, like did any of them feel meh? Did any of them stand out especially? Like the main quests, I mean.
I'm trying to think of the major quests. I will say the Siege of Weishaupt.
That was solid.
Yeah.
That was solid. I love giant face Gillenon in the clouds was great. I really love the little kid that we meet there.
Mila!
And
Oh, she's adorable. She and her dad are adorable.
She's great. And I think she had, like, just the right amount of content where, like, she didn't become, like, she didn't latch onto the group, but she was still just a good presence. And I adore, like, the final, when you're getting the strike on Gillenon, and Rook's like, Lucanus, and throws him up the dagger, and Lucanus has those wings, and he goes in for the kill. That was excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ways Up was definitely solid. Later on, like all of Act 3, okay, like the whole, it's maybe too many climaxes, but it's a huge culmination, and it's super epic. Parts of it make up for where the game is a bit lacking, but then at the very end, it feels like the game is incomplete.
Yes.
Because it's so much, like, I am in such a whirlwind of emotions because of this game and because of this culmination at the end of it. And it's like there's no closure at the end. Like the conclusion is not the closure. It's maybe loading the lighthouse after would have helped. Maybe hearing Manfred shout or something like that, something to help us process that epic conclusion, because there's so much adrenaline, so many intense emotions, and maybe a party after with little tidbits of conversation, like an Inquisition, and maybe it closes with a moment with either your closest friend or your lover, and you sit down, you smile or something, lean your head on their shoulder, and it fades away, to have closure after that conclusion.
I'll say, I want to rephrase that a little bit, because I think the ending with Solus, I thought that was absolutely, totally fine. I was fully okay with that. I think instead of closure, the word I would use is wind down.
Yes.
There's a climax and then credits. And I like that time to, settle down. And I guess DA2 was kind of the same way.
That's a good way of putting it, Cole. Yeah. Winding down.
Yeah. No, I feel like what they could have done, and obviously I'm just trying to write my own narrative at this point, but just some conclusion stuff with the companions, what they went on to actually do. Maybe, like, what is Rook doing? How is the South doing? Because it basically got destroyed. There's just a lot of loose ends, I feel like.
Yeah. I would agree there.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I was going to say something else and I forgot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's alright. Yeah, so... I lost it.
Conclusions, something like that? Winding down?
Conclusion, closure, winding down.
I don't know. Oh, that was it. I don't know if you got this feeling while you were playing, but I definitely got the feeling several times that they planned to include more, but ran out of time or money.
Kind of.
Like there was content they wanted to include but didn't. And one of the biggest ones that stands out to me is I feel like the Lords of Fortune and Mornwatch didn't get a lot of content outside of, Emmerich and Tosh. Everyone else deals in the main story. The Veil Jumpers, the Shadow Dragons, the Antivan Crows, they all play a big role.
Yeah. I feel... not just that, but, like... I hope this doesn't sound too... I don't know. But it also feels like a lot of lore was kind of missing from them. Particularly, like, the not-so-pleasant lore about them. If that makes sense. Like, they're not 100% good guys, and I feel like that level of Dragon Age moral greyness was... Sorry, I think that's the fire alarm. All's well. Feels like it's just missing that... I don't know.
Like the Antivan Crows?
Yeah,
it's not really... Yeah, they're treated like, good vigilantes, but they kill people for money.
Yeah, and they have slaves. Some of the crows are slaves.
And we'll touch on this more when we talk about companions, but just, the abuse in crow training and things that Lucanus went through, that all crows go through, trauma in childhood to become a good assassin, even if they have a fine line, a boundary that they don't cross. There's still that abuse, and it doesn't touch on that, like,
and that, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
It's fine. Like Katerina seems, she's not all good,
Yeah, and I think that is a common issue that people have with the game, is that they don't really address all the darker aspects of anything in Thedas.
And I think one thing that could have helped with that, and that I find that was missing, where Inquisition had as its strong suit, was conversations outside of cutscenes. Conversations where you just stand and cycle through question after question, learn a character's backstories, the characters from the factions, learn about the factions, learn about the city, learn about, different things, anecdotal things, growing up, or anything. I could spend hours talking with Dorian. I learned more from Dorian in Inquisition about Minrathous than I learned about Minrathous in Dragon Age the Veilguard. So it felt like if we could have had these moments to talk with faction allies, companions, and other characters outside of cutscenes, just to converse with them for a good solid 10 to 15 minutes, that would have filled a lot of gaps. It would have filled lore, it would have filled story, backstory, and it would have felt more complete.
Yes.
I think that's a great way of describing it. The other major things that were missing were, like, I don't recall much direction of slaves in Minrathous, which in the past was like a big deal.
Yeah, to the point where Dorian never thought about it and had to ask you directly, why are there no slaves here?
Yeah.
And I notice this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is something that I had kind of expected, which is more like both politics and religion. They didn't really dive into that very much, if at all. Like, there's barely any mention of the Chantry.
Yeah. Now that you mention that now that bothers me that you've mentioned it, because like the religion in Tevinter is completely different from that in the south. It's like not the opposite, but like the other side of the coin.
And we wanted to see more. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the Anderfells, there are a lot of devout Andrastians. In Minrathous, they believe in Andrasta, but they believe she was a mage, and when she freed the slave, and so there was that schism, and then there's in Navarra, outside of Navarra, they see the Navarran customs as,
Right.
And so there wasn't much of that, whereas in other Dragon Age games, there's a lot of the politics, like in Origins, it's a lot Loghain talking about Marek and the versus the Blight and things with the Grey Wardens. In Dragon Age 2, it's mages versus Templars and everything going on in Kirkwall, but there's that. It's very political as well. In Inquisition, there's the Orlais politics. There's the Templar Rebellion. There are a few different things that branch out from there. And in the Veilguard, it's kind of glossed over.
Yeah, it just a lot of. I feel bad saying it. I swear I loved this game. I loved the way it presented itself, but like the lore feels more generalized if you compare it to previous games and how they handled how every faction worked, how the politics and religions, and it was very rich, and it feels like a lot of that was not dumbed down, but it wasn't significant enough compared to the main story, what's happening. Like, for example, the elven gods are back. Everyone's just, oh, yep, Andrastianism.
It wasn't as developed as in other games.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And no, I think it's okay to talk about these weaker points of the game. I think it's important to talk about them.
Definitely.
You know, because we all care about this game. We all like it so much. We want it to be better, and we want, you know, future installments to be better.
Exactly. And it does feel like some of the story, you know, plot points and lore points were like, oh, the fans want this, the fans are talking about that, we're going to throw this in. But then they don't expand on the why or how. They just throw it in. And it's like, yes, you're throwing it in to make us happy, but what will make us more happy is if it has meaning and purpose.
Right.
I'd rather it not be there than just be there without meaning or purpose.
Yeah. And I have plenty of thoughts that I'm sure we'll all be talking about this in future videos of our own.
Yeah, for sure.
But more positive things I want to say. I held off on this for a while. But way back at the beginning of this talk, we talked about identity as being a major theme. And as I started thinking about that, there are obvious examples of that, where, such as with Tosh. That becomes probably the biggest one. But you think about it, I think every companion goes through struggling with who they are. Neb wonders, who am I in relation to Docktown and Minrathous? Balara's like, who am I in relation to all this world-ending stuff? Harding is obviously dealing with Harding stuff. Davrin is like, okay, now I have to raise a griffin.
Emmerich with the immortality versus mortality.
Exactly. And
Buchanan
so and Spite,
sure.
No, identity comes back kind of a lot, and it all, gosh, there is one bit that I absolutely love. See, for my playthrough, at the end, I talked Solus down, and I looked up online what happens if you don't. And it is so cool what he said, because he's like talking down to you, you're just a nobody, and and you can tell he's about to say God.
There is a version where he does outright say he's a god, which is awesome.
Oh my gosh. Which is just Solus finally realizing how arrogant he's been.
Yeah. Especially with his contrast with Elgernan. And there are people who think, like, oh, well, Solus would never say that. But they hinted at it. They foreshadowed. He pretty much tells you in a dream before, Elgernan, me and him frustrate one another because we, like Mythal and her fragments, well, they're not fragments of one another, but similar kind of thing, where it's like, that's what I could have been in another life. And that's why
Exactly, and it also depends on Solus's relationship with Rook and Rook's choices, because I know that, okay, so there was this one line that I was waiting for that they showed in the behind the scenes where Gareth David Lloyd says, they call me the Dread Wolf. What would they call you when this is over? Right. And he says it like in an angry tone in that. But when Solus was discussing that with my Rook, he said it casually, very, very like out of curiosity. They call me the Dread Wolf. What would they call you? And and so I surmise that depending on how Rook responds to Solus, it changes how Solus talks to Rook, which will then change how Solus reacts at the end as well. And so there can be multiple different endings with multiple different reactions from Solus at the end.
Similar to Trespasser.
That's cool, because that's a good example of giving the replayability aspect, you know, and that's what you want. But you don't want it just with that. You want it with everything.
Yeah, that's another big issue that people have with it, is that you don't have as much... Rook doesn't have as much range optionally. Like, he can't really be a bad guy.
Yeah.
Which, I kind of agree. Like, that's a valid concern. I have never played a bad guy in any BioWare game, but I understand why you might want that choice and a wider range of options to choose from.
Even if just a little bit more gray.
Yeah.
You know, not entirely anti-hero if Rook's role has to be hero, but you know, depending on his faction, I say his because mine was male, but depending on their faction, depending on who Rook is and where Rook comes from, maybe there are certain choices that make more sense if it's a little bit more on the renegade side of things.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe it's just me, but I felt like the game kind of sets you up to be the hero, because all the backstories involves you being, you saved some people because reasons. Like, to be fair though, the game, it doesn't present it in a happy, like, yay, no wait, what am I wording it? Like, a lot of the things Rook does are morally grey. To be fair, it's just the way the game presents them makes it seem like 100% you're correct in this decision, and I don't know, I can't off the top of my head think of an example, but that's the vibe I got from it, at least. So maybe that's playing a factor into it.
Yeah, I when they first announced like what the backgrounds were gonna be, and they like showed the descriptions, I'm like, all right, so you always choose to save people. Like, that's kind of taken something away from the player.
Yeah.
And one thing, I was excited to play a Lord of Fortune, but now that I see how little content they have, that's pretty low down on my list. And I read that it's not optional that you were a galley slave before becoming a lord. And I was like, okay, I really don't like that. Because I had this whole headcanon backstory that was like, I'm going to be an elf who joined the Lords of Fortune to provide for my impoverished family. But nope, can't do that.
Yeah.
It's about half an hour, so let's wrap this up with one last positive thing. What was the moment that maybe not necessarily was the most narratively strong, but it struck you the most at the heart?
Phyllis crying.
Oh god, yeah.
Can
I disqualify that?
From my service. When she releases him, and then when Venan says, "I forgive you," like, okay, I'm tearing up just thinking about it. Like,
yeah, oh my god.
Like I was like, I was bawling my eyes out. I was like, that moment when Solus like bends with his hand, his hand at his eyes, and he's like, you hear him weeping, and like that's the direction I went with. The redeeming Solus, the Lavellan, and it just. That moment of, and I don't know how impactful it would be if a friend inquisitor shows up, because I found in Inquisition I would treasure the chance to be wrong once again, my friend. I found that super impactful. But like, this was it just came to get me. Like it hits it right in the feels.
Yeah.
Well, for me, aside from getting goosebumps at the end when the Trespasser music starts playing for Souls' Farewell, oh my god, the music in this game, they know what they're doing. Aside from that, probably the most impactful main quest for me was Elgrenon's ritual in Arlathan Forest.
Oh god.
First of all,
that was my favorite quest.
All right, quick negative. You have to infiltrate it disguised as Venatori You are the only ones not wearing masks.
Yep, and
Except
you
for the
stand right
slaves.
in front of Illigernon.
And you stand
at the start.
everybody. That was silly, and it made me laugh.
Don't
But-
think I don't see you. We're on the street, you see us.
Gosh. All right. But first of all, walking past them sacrificing a hala
Oh
in a
god.
brutal way, I'm like,
Oh.
holy shit.
I
This is
actually
Dragon
stopped-
Age. Okay.
Yeah, I had to stop playing and just cry for like 10 minutes. I couldn't just continue after that. They're like, you
Oh,
don't have
gosh.
to watch, and I'm like, it's content creation, I have to watch it. It was
Yes.
horrible.
Yes, and it was like, oh my good, like I recorded it, but I closed my eyes. I was like, this is, yeah.
Yeah,
no.
that was brutal.
Yep.
And then when Elgranon kind of locks you in the fade, and Solus helps you out, and they have that banter back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yes.
I don't have much more to say than that. It just hit me.
It was
Yeah,
good,
that was solid too. Yeah, that their back and forth was solid too.
Yeah.
My favorite one was when you go to Tearstone Island and the ultimate sacrifice is made by.
Oh, jeez, dang.
If I can't pick those two things you guys said, I would pick that. I lost Davern and Asan, and I spent all of Act 3 crying.
It felt. Well, I'll say what I think about that when we discuss companions, because it's part of Davern's character arc. But yeah, it does hit hard too.
Yeah, I didn't see it coming, which is perfect. I didn't think they would do that to me. I took it personally. Yeah, it was a good moment. We will never forget you. It's when Asan jumps in after Davern, that's the part where I really just went, no, both of them. And see after, oh my god, when you go back to the lighthouse and there's just an empty spot where you would just go pet Asan. Oh my god, I was a baby.
Yeah.
Yep, it was great.
Yeah.
All
right.
Yep.
Let's wrap this up and get on to the companions talk.
Excellent. And that was it. There we go. Next part, DarthShadie Lavellan.